Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Christoforos Mavrogiannis. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Michigan. And today I'm going to talk about some of the work we've been doing in my lab on building fluent human-robot teamwork. Actually, it's a very great connection with Andrea's talk, so I think there's going to be a lot of interesting connections here. All right, so let's jump straight through it. So I run the Fluent Robotics Lab. You can find many of my students here in attendance, and we're going to be here the whole week. These are some of our toys. We are part of the new robotics department at the University of Michigan. And as a lab, we're generally quite inspired by human teams. Cool, so as a lab, we are inspired by human teams. Human teams are amazing. They can manage to do a pit stop in 3 seconds. When I was growing up, this was not possible, but I found this video. It's fantastic, the level of coordination and how a team of 12 or 16, I think, people, engineers, work together to make sure that everything happens at the right time, the right way, and ensure safety and performance for an F1 vehicle. It's amazing. So we're inspired by this kind of coordination, and our goal is to leverage some of the insights from human teams to actually engineer fluent human-robot collaboration. Now, what is the state of human-robot collaboration currently? It's a whole field of research, and that's why we have workshops and conferences. In many ways, it kind of looks like this. So this is an Amazon fulfillment center. You can see dozens, hundreds, thousands of robots working closely together. And naturally, your question could be, where are the humans? The humans, for a while, in those kinds of environments, had been in very specific designated areas, far from the robots, so that they would not interfere and reduce productivity and comfort and safety for themselves. But it looks like things are changing. There's a lot of industry efforts, some of which you can see in this slide. So there's a lot of interest in blending humans and robots more closely to achieve increased productivity and efficiency for operations in fulfillment, in warehouse automation, in manufacturing, and so on. But the key question remains, and it's a question that has been recurring in this workshop and conferences and beyond, and the question is how to properly mesh human and robot activities so that we can achieve this productivity that we seek. When I was starting my research about 10 years ago on this topic, you could think of building a robot and putting it out there in a human environment. You would typically treat humans as moving obstacles, right? Humans are moving around. If we're able to predict a little bit how they move, let's just try to get the robot to avoid them. And there's been a lot of progress since then. This is the benchmark on new scenes. I'm sure there's more papers since 2024, but that was a quick screenshot I was able to find. And that just shows you how the progress in this community and the field of human motion prediction has been improving rapidly. However, the big question that has affected much of my research and my thinking over the past few years is human motion prediction all we really need? And I think this connects, again, really well with other topics that we've explored in this workshop already. And just to follow up on that, I'll just tease out some of the work we did a couple of years ago, where we really tried to manipulate the models of human motion prediction that we're using inside the standard model predictive controller and try to understand how this manipulation impacts navigation performance. So we created these different kinds of conditions, and as you can see, we used these different kinds of models, namely constant velocity prediction, social GAN with 1 sample, social GAN with 20 samples. Social GAN was the state of the art at the time, and still quite a robust model. But surprisingly, or perhaps not as much, what we found was the following. So models that were actually performing better in terms of prediction error did not necessarily result in better navigation performance measured with respect to safety and efficiency. And so overall, that was a very partial, but still nonetheless, partial evidence that better prediction does not necessarily allow for this improved performance in close interaction settings. And of course, there's a lot of things here to unpack, and there's this whole thing of benchmarking is still an open kind of question. And to address that, we've been doing some work in parallel, for which we present a paper at this conference, namely what are the right scenarios that we should be evaluating, what are the right metrics, and so on. However, the main point I want to drive home in this talk and in this for the theme of this workshop is that human and robot motion are really coupled. And so we cannot think of prediction in isolation from generation. So the robot motion is actually influencing the behavior of the human, and we need to account for that at the time of deployment in order to achieve this fluent kind of interactions that we're envisioning. And so starting from this theme, I will start looking at some of the work we've been doing on enabling robots to work around people first. And mostly focusing on navigation research that we've been doing over the years. Again, we're inspired by humans, and humans have this amazing capability of even in these very close encounters to actually transmit a lot of information with their behavior. So as you can see, and this is not a coordinated situation. I just asked some of my friends to walk from one side to the other of this hallway. And what you can see is that the body posture, their eye gaze, a lot of things going on, they just allow them to just avoid each other and go their merry ways. Now, this is a topic that has been explored previously in the HRI community. There's this whole discussion about this topic of legibility, which is the property of motion that enables an observer to quickly and confidently infer an actor's goal, right? So in this example that you see, imagine there's a manipulator arm. Its goal is to grab the green bottle. Whenever the motion is exaggerated towards the right side, in that case, towards the green bottle, then the observer has a better chance at predicting the actual goal of the robot. The thing is, this was initially demonstrated in manipulation settings, and navigation is kind of subtle. It's a very different kind of situation. The environments that I showed with close interaction settings require us to think more deeply about what is the right kind of goal in order to be legible. So the key question here is, what goal should the robot be legible over? Should I just be legible over my destination, or should I be legible over something else? I'll spoil it for you. We have some partial evidence, and that's teasing out some ongoing research in my lab that demonstrates that passing legibility improves navigation performance. And we're looking into that through objective and subjective measures. We've had about 36 people come to the lab and walk next to our robot, and this is kind of what we found. And that's something that for me was years in the making. I was waiting to really investigate this kind of topic for a while, because for me, it's always been about passing. I thought of navigation since the early days as something that is heavily based on how we interact with each other in the passing sense. So this is a video from Greece. I'm from Greece. This is a folk dance that you can find. It's called Gaitanaki, and people, are holding these ribbons and they dance around each other. For me, the inspiration for much of my PhD research came from this kind of setting. And the inspiration here is just as simple as the fact that it's the passing that governs how people are interacting when they're navigating in close interaction settings. It turns out that there's a deeper mathematical backing for this idea. In fact, there's a whole topology of interaction in those settings. You can study this with something called braid groups, which is from the field of low-dimensional topology. And essentially, what you see here as patterns, you could think of them as representing the types of patterns that humans, when they navigate, their trajectories form. So that's an idea we've been exploring over the years with several publications more on the theoretical sense and in simulation applications. But this idea matured over the years into a model predictive control architecture, which we deployed on a real robot and tested extensively. And so the idea here is simple. So we have a robot. The robot needs to navigate from some point A to some point B, and the robot is encountering many other humans that could be attending to their tasks of their own. So we're observing a slice of the past, and given that, and given some very coarse prediction model, namely constant velocity prediction, we are reasoning about the kinds of passing interactions that the robot will encounter over a receding horizon in the future. And of course, there's other things like the respect of personal space and the fact that the goal, of course, the robot needs to reach its own goal. And then we close the loop. So this is kind of the key idea. And the thing to emphasize again is this idea of a constant velocity prediction, which, inevitably is a relatively poor coarse prediction model. So despite this, what we're able to show deploying in this ballbot kind of platform in our lab was that this kind of architecture can actually handle complex crowds quite robustly. As you can see here, the robot takes early inclinations to avoid the crowdedness that it's anticipating. And this was not only observed through qualitative evidence, but also through quantitative evidence. So this is essentially, again, this dipole of safety and efficiency. So what we see here is that our architecture compared to baselines, including a state-of-the-art at the time reinforcement learning-based algorithm, was able to produce better safety, so higher clearances for better, for comparable efficiency, as we see. Now, safety and efficiency are great, but they don't say anything about what the users thought. And so on another study that we did, we looked at how users perceived these kinds of behaviors of the robot. So a robot that reasons about passing in this very explicit sense was again able to kind of handle humans working in parallel to attend to some navigation tasks driven by semi-randomized kind of behaviors in this kind of setting. So what we found here was that humans that were working close to a robot running an algorithm were following trajectories of velocities that were closer to constant, meaning so the acceleration was lower, and that was not only perceived in the objective sense, but it was also perceived by users themselves. So when we looked at quotes that they contributed after each interaction with the robot, we saw things like, I barely noticed the robot when I was performing the tasks, versus other things like, I had no idea what the robot was doing, or I felt that the robot was in my personal space for baselines. And that was an artifact of actually going through this important but tedious effort of analyzing very carefully and rigorously the quotes that users contributing, open form responses after each interaction with a robot. And this is our coding scheme. We have a paper on that, and we go into detail on how we acquired that and how we came up with this kind of breakdown of the things that users contributed. Now, there's a lot of other things going on here that we didn't touch upon. Part of the challenges in actually ensuring this fluent interaction in these settings that we're envisioning is actually related to aspects of embodiment and culture. And that's something that we've been exploring recently with some collaborators and my student, Andrew Stratton. And so some of the things that we're interested in here, as you see, we have been reproducing this kind of setting that we've been exploring for years, which basically involves teamwork in the sense of navigation. So there's a robot that is navigating in the same shared space as two other users. And these are videos from the two sites, one in Michigan and one in France, in Toulouse. And what we're trying to understand is what are the implications of having different robots and deploying it on two different kinds of cultures, let's say, in terms of understanding performance as part of teamwork. We're looking at related questions that I touched upon on how prediction also informs teamwork. This is work in progress. We're hoping to have some exciting results very soon. But with that, I want to switch gears a little bit. I talked about robots that work next to people. Now I want to talk about robots that work with people. And one project that was started in my lab is actually inspired by the personal experience of actually moving stuff. That's a video from a show that many of you might have or not seen. I grew up with these things. It's Friends. So as you can see, they're moving a couch. There's a lot of things going on. It's clearly a very multimodal kind of interaction. I have muted the video, but you should find it online. It's hilarious. And it shows you how language and vision and all of these stimuli, they work together into this delicate dance that results in this, not in this case, but in many other, in many other successful cases, when you move your couch, you're probably able to do a little better than that. Anyway, so we're looking at this problem of collaborative transport with a robot. And just to abstract things away, the aspect that we're looking at here is imagine you're starting from some initial configuration, you have some goal configuration, and you're in a real world environment, there will be some obstacles, so you want to avoid them. So how do you do that? One interesting thing in this example, when you have a robot and a human on the other side, is that there's some inherent asymmetry, right? So the robot, leveraging decades of progress in the piano movers problem, it can easily, or perhaps less easily, depending on the environment, plan a path and go from point A to point B. And this could look like this. At the same time, the human will likely have a few waypoints in mind when starting to move, and maybe that looks kind of like that. And sometimes these two plans could be in conflict. The conflict could be literally looking like this, but it could also be that it's still the same side, but not the same way. So there is some mismatch, there is some misalignment between how the two agents are thinking about going about the same task. And so the interesting thing is realistic environments of this sort is that the layout of obstacles is influencing the types of strategies that are available. So again, as you can see, there's some topological foundation to this problem, which can be abstracted away using tools like the ones that I teased earlier in some of my slides, which were talking about topological braids and topological representations about capturing the layout of space. So in this case, what this means is you have this tuple of essentially interactions with the environment. And the way you can read this is that we will first pass from the right of the table, of the first table, then from the left of the second table, then from the right of the last table. So this is kind of how we represent the different types of strategies that are available in a given layout. And so the question becomes, how can we coordinate passing in such an environment? Like, how can we enable the human and the robot to work together to enable essentially moving this couch from point A to point B? So the perspective here is that every action that each of these agents is taking has a communicative effects into each other, which we capture with this model of human inference, which basically you can read this as saying, what is the probability of passing from the left or the right, given some aspects of the context, like the object state, the obstacles, the goal location, and also what the two agents did in the past few time steps. So we built this model, which we use in order to enable the robot to take actions that communicate the right things to the human at the right time. So a quick example is when the robot is shifting towards the left, then the human is probably going to get the idea that the intent or the preference of the robot is to go from the left side. Similarly, when there's an inclination towards the right side, there's probably some higher probability that we're going from the right, and that is communicated to the human partner. So how do we use that? We make, again, a very big assumption. We make use of a very coarse model of constant velocity. Not the best model, but the model that you will see that it did something well. So what do? We integrate everything, we plug everything into a model predictive controller. And this controller is, again, reasoning about a couple of things. So the first thing is the passing entropy. What is the passing entropy? Is essentially the uncertainty over what strategy we're going to be following. Are we going from the left or from the right? So we're capturing that by using the information entropy, which is a measure of uncertainty, essentially, in that sense. And our goal is to minimize it. So minimal entropy will imply confidence, 100% confidence that we're going over one side or the other. And then the rest are basically standard things. We want to avoid collisions with the static environment or our human partner. And we also want to take actions that are goal-directed. We want to reach to the goal location at some point, goal pose. Okay, so we put this on a real robot. This is Stretch, and this is a user. And you can see that essentially we're moving this lightweight object. The lightweight aspect was because of the relatively low payload of the robot, but basically you get the sense of what's going on, the types of interactions that we're having. And quantitatively, what we saw, we compared against two baselines. One was essentially a vanilla model predictive controller that was not reasoning about the communicative effects of the robot actions. And the other one was VRNN, a neural network imitation learning-based framework, which essentially was trying to use trajectory prediction to essentially engineer the right action at the right time. And what we found was that our framework was able to be perceived as more competent, less discomforting, and more of a fluent collaborator compared to these two baselines to a significant, statistically significant extent across 24 trials with users at our university. Qualitatively, you can see some of the differences. So some of the things that go wrong in the sense of the non-communicative baselines is that the robot is failing to understand these moments that, their actions have some critical consequences, and that results in some lower performance or even failures on certain occasions. So with that, I want to drive home the main takeaway that I want to pass and contribute to this discussion, which is about this idea that human and robot motion are coupled. We cannot think of prediction in a way that is decoupled from generation. The actions that the robot is taking have communicative effects on humans, and that changes the behavior of the humans. This is a hard problem. I don't have all the answers, but what I want to point out with this kind of examples that we showed across two different domains of working with people and around people is that on certain occasions, by explicitly reasoning about the information content of the robot actions, could actually possibly relax the requirements for the prediction quality that we need. So on certain occasions, even with something as simple as a constant velocity model, and on certain domains, we can do pretty well. And so, of course, there's much more here, and I'm contributing this to this workshop on trajectory prediction because I'm very interested in everyone's thoughts and continue this discussion. My hope is that we can leverage these kinds of insights to move closer towards this vision of getting robots and humans working fluently together, both next to each other and also explicitly with each other. And with that, I'll close and take any questions. Thank you very much.
Any questions? If somebody has questions, please step up to the microphone.
Okay, first I wanted to say, really interesting presentation. I remember reading your paper. It was like a 2022 paper. The conclusion was, I think, that these like different prediction algorithms, like state of the art and SCAN and stuff, didn't really like improve the navigation performance. And was it that paper that it was like talking about the error was like around like 0.5 meters or something? Like it was like kind of like a higher, kind of had like a high error on the prediction. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm remembering correctly. I'm just curious, have you looked into that to see like whether like driving that error down would like affect performance or anything?
We have ongoing work on using some more recent models, so including the human scene transformer. We've been spending some time getting it integrated with our systems, which of course will result in lower prediction error than the one you mentioned. I think the key thing to notice there is that we use the same controller, right? And so you would expect that the lower prediction error would help the controller do better. The controller, I can also tell you, spent a lot of time tuning and making it, so it wasn't a crappy controller. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, we are actively looking into ways in which we can build better prediction models. We're not saying that constant velocity is all you need. I think what I want to make, as a point here is that that there's more than just prediction, and thinking about how we essentially how we effectively close the loop between prediction and control is an open question that we need to look into it further. And you know, we're having some ongoing directions. As you saw, some of the talks here are also kind of hinting towards that. There's a lot of problems because obviously when you have, you know, when you're reasoning about the implications of every action you're taking on every other agent, the computational cost and the data in the era of foundation models is also non-trivial. So there's a lot of open questions, but I think the main point here is, you know, what else should we be looking at on top of just trying to drive this error down?
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question.
All right.
You showed the robot navigating in the shared space with the people. Do you think if that robot would be equipped with something like LEDs that would communicate what it would do about next, would there be a significant impact on your methods?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it always comes down to the type of interaction that you're envisioning designing. So every environment, every domain is different. In our case, what we wanted to explore was the motion level interactions. But obviously, there's additional signals that you could leverage, including sounds, including different kinds of lights. I think the question is, what does that look like from the perspective of the stakeholders, right? So if we were to deploy this in an industrial setting, and in a particular environment with multiple other stimuli, how does that look like for the users? Is that something that works better or worse? And I think depending on the environment, the answer could be yes or no. I visited the Ford plant a few months ago, and in Michigan, if you haven't been, you should go. So it's a very interesting experience. It's a very controlled kind of environment, but it gives you a sense of the kinds of stimuli that a worker is experiencing when faced with all of these assembly tasks. They were assembling F-150 cars. And so I think it comes down to how can you reduce their workload, their mental load, while enabling them to be productive. So the answer is yes. I think there is value in additional modalities. It just depends on the kind of interaction that you're building. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the really nice talk. You had this one slide where you showed, with which you made the argument that a better prediction does not necessarily lead to improved behavior.
Yeah.
So what is your own intuition about these results? Is this because the improvement in prediction is really not significant? Or is it because planning and execution cannot make use of this improved prediction?
I think it's the latter. I think it's the fact that designing the motion of the robot is not as simple as just avoiding a collision. There's much more going on. When I see you navigating on the hallway, I read through a lot of other signals that you're broadcasting. You might be distracted, and I might detect that, and I might modify my behavior, or you might be fully engaged, and your body posture could communicate to me, okay, we're doing it this way. And so I think the way we've been building our stack, our architecture, the conventional way that I think many in the community are following is this pure abstraction of everything is just a flat thing. We're all bubbles in space, and we should just avoid. But there's so much more. There's so many modalities, and I think that's also very relevant to the foundation models discussion that we're going to have that I think we could start integrating into.
Thanks.
Thank you.